So the sign for congruent is an equal sign with the squiggly line above it.
Yeah.
Where's the Wi-Fi?
Corresponding.
Oh gosh.
It's the same thing. It's the word means the same as when we did angles, corresponding angles. Corresponding means in the same position. So corresponding angles are like if you've got two right triangles that are the same size,
Yeah.
A and Y are both 90s, so they're called corresponding angles.
Yeah.
C would be the same as which one?
X. Z.
Z, so they're corresponding. And then B and X are corresponding. So, since these are congruent triangles, you would say angle A is congruent to angle Y because they're both 90. Angle C is congruent to angle Z. And then angle B and angle X. Then corresponding sides are the same thing. What sides correspond to each other? Here's the short side, AB. It corresponds to the short side, XY. So they're congruent. And then here, this is the other leg of the right triangle, CA, which corresponds to this one, YZ. Now remember, when you name them, it doesn't matter if you call it AC or CA. And then the hypotenuse CB corresponds to this hypotenuse, XZ. So what we're working towards is you're going to have to write a congruence statement. Sometimes, most of the time, this is given to you. And sometimes they give you a problem like this and they ask you to write it. So when you do that, you write down, since it's a triangle, you got to put the triangle symbol, ABC, or I could call it CBA, or I could call it BAC. It doesn't matter what order you put it in, but it's going to be easier to correct if you put it alphabetically the first one. You don't have to, it's just easier to correct, like I said. Now, depending on how you write it, if I put ABC, I got to put it's congruent to, the second part matters, what order you put it in, according to what you did right here. Since I put A first, I would have to put Y first, because they're corresponding angles. And then since I put B, I would have to put X, because they're corresponding. And then the last one is C and Z. So there's the congruent statement. If you would have wrote BAC, then you just got to switch the order accordingly. B is the same as X, so I'd have to put X first. A is the same as Y, so I'd put Y second. C is the same as Z. So the second one matters, the first one doesn't. You just got to put it accordingly. So here we've got, write a congruence statement for the triangles. So again, the first one, it doesn't matter, or you could start with this one too. It doesn't matter which one you put first. Triangle ABC is congruent to, since I put A first, I have to put which one?
P.
P, because they have 3 marks and 3 marks. And then B, Q, and then C, R. Okay? So here they're not triangles, but they tell us right here, this is the congruent statement. DEFG means you start here. DEFG is congruent to KLMN. Now, you can use this to figure out what's equal. Angle D is first, K is first, so that means they're equal. Angle D and K. E and L are equal, F and M, G and N. And you can also use this for sides. Side DE would be the same as KL because they're the first two. Then EF would equal LM because they're the next two. Side FG and MN. And then the fourth one is the first and last, DG and KM. So to find X, here's the x. What's that gonna be equal to?
8.
Nope. It's
No, 12.
NM, which is FG, which is 12, yep. So 5x plus 2 equals 12. So solve it, subtract 2, divide by 5, and you get 2. Then to find y is an angle. It's pointing right there. So angle L is going to equal angle E, right there. So 5y plus 6 equals 111. Everyone see how I figured that out by using that? Second letter, second letter. So subtract 6, and then divide by 5, and you get 21. Third angle theorem, this one is just common sense. All this is saying is if in any two triangles, if two of the angles equal the other two angles, if you had to guess, how would the third angle compare to each other? They'd be what? Equal also. So this angle has to equal that. And if you put numbers in, it's easy to see. Say this angle right here is 80 degrees, which means this one's also 80, right? Because they're marked as equal.
Yeah.
This one looks like about a 60 degree angle, which means this one's got to be 60. So if this is 80 and 60, that adds up to 140, which means this has to be 40. If this is 80 and 60, that adds up to 140, which means that's got to be 40. So, if two angles are equal, the third one has to be equal every single time. So, looking at this angle equals this angle, because they got 2 marks, 2 marks, so that means this is 67. This angle equals that one, so that means this is 54. So, we got to figure out what x is. Well, if this is 67 and 54, we can figure out this one, right? Because they got to add up to 180. So take 180 and subtract off these two. It's 59 degrees, which means this one also has to be 59, right?
Yep.
So 4x minus 5 has to equal a 59 degree angle. So there's your equation, then you solve it. Add 5. Divide by 4, and you get 16. Determining if triangles are congruent. Two triangles are congruent, and actually it's not just triangles, it's any figure. If all corresponding angles are congruent, and all corresponding sides are congruent. So if you look at this picture, we can see the sides. This side equals that, this equals that, this equals that. So we know the 3 sides are congruent, but then you got to check the angles. This is 81 and that's 81. These two are going to be equal because they're vertical, right?
Yeah.
So since 2 angles are equal, we know the third one has to be equal, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so on your assignment, we don't need to justify your reasoning. You're just going to say yes or no.
Yes.
Now, it doesn't tell us to do it here, but on the assignment, you're going to have to. If they are congruent, you got to write the congruent statement.
All the sides have to be equal, don't they?
Yep. So, the congruent statement is you just pick one of the figures, triangle DEF, is congruent. So now you got to put it, the second part in the right order. D, I put first, is the same as H, so I got to put H first. E would be the same as G, and then F is the same angle. So that you got to write the congruent statement. Everyone got that? Properties of congruent. We've gone through these before, but now we're gonna get into proofs where you're gonna have to use these properties. Not today, but it's coming up quick. Every triangle is congruent to itself. That's reflexive. Symmetric is if ABC equals DEF, then if you just switch the order, DEF is congruent to ABC. We don't really use that in any proofs. Transitive property, if ABC equals DEF and DEF equals JKL, then ABC has to equal JKL, right? Okay. All right. So this, if we had to find the value of x, since this is 58, so is this. Since this is 74 and it's got 2 marks, this one's 74. So we can figure out that angle just by subtracting these two off of 180. It's 48 degrees. But we need to figure out what x is. So 5x minus 2 has to equal the 48. And then you solve. And 2. Divide by 5. And you get 10. Then the other part, again, on the assignment, I'll put it up here to show you. We don't need to justify a reason. We're just going to say yes or no. And then if it is yes, you got to write the congruent statement. So, are these two congruent?
Yes.
Yes. We see the 3 sides are all congruent. This is 90, that's 90, this is equal, that's equal, which means these two have to be equal. So the congruent statement is triangle EFD, or DEF, however you want to put them, is congruent. E is the same as Y, so I got to put Y first. Then I put F, which is the same as Z, and then the last one is X. Okay? So let me put this on the board so you can see what we're going to be doing. When you do these, identify any figures that could be congruent. We don't need to explain. You can just put yes or no. And then if it is, write the congruent statement. So here it's this triangle and this triangle. Here again it's 2 triangles. Here it's a 4-sided figure. And here it's a 5-sided figure. So when they're 4-sided or 5-sided, you don't need to put any figure, you just put the letters in order. For example, are these two congruent?
Yep.
Yep. The 4 sides, corresponding sides are equal, and their corresponding angles are all equal. So, all you gotta do is you'd put yes. A, B, C, D is congruent. Now since I went from A to B, really I could start at S, P, Q, or R, and I would just have to flip it. So which one do you want to start at? S. Now, the only way you'd get this wrong is if you went this way, from S to R, because I went from A to B, the short side. So
Yeah.
since I started S, I gotta go this way around. S, P, Q, R. Everyone understand? Same thing here. If they are, you just start at one point and go around, and then you gotta make sure you start at the corresponding point and go the same way. Here also, it is a 4-sided figure being compared to this one. This one's a little harder to see, but it's 2 triangles that overlap each other. There and